Welcome to The Consul's Widow, written by Brian M. Brumbaugh, narrated by Gwyneth Paltrow, an ink and imagination production. In the shadow of a fallen republic, one woman dares to outwit an empire. Betrayal, seduction, and vengeance collide in The Consul's Widow, a gripping Roman epic of power, politics, and the quiet fury of a woman wronged. Buckle in. The Senate will never see her coming. Let's begin! Chapter 1. The Funeral Pyre. Rome, 139 AD, Palatine Hill. They buried the consul at dawn. Marcus Varinius, hero of Illyricum, pillar of Senate, friend to emperors, was laid upon the pyre in full ceremonial armor, polished until it reflected the sky like a god returning to Olympus. The flames would strip it from him soon enough. Atop the steps of the Palatine Temple, Cassia Octavia stood in mourning black, a veil draped over her face like spider silk. She did not weep. Rome expected grief. She gave them theater. The crowd, senators, clients, generals, gossiping patrician wives, watched her with the same reverence they gave the dying republic, as if both still held meaning, if only in memory. Her silence spoke volumes. The perfect Roman widow, noble, dutiful, untouchable. But beneath the veil, Cassia's lips curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile. The man beside her, a frail, liver-spotted senator named Publius Lartius, leaned in with a whisper. The gods took him too soon. Cassia turned her head slowly. The gods take no one, Publius. Rome does. He blinked. She gave him nothing more. Later, in the Villa Varinia, the curtains were drawn. The wine was poured. The servants moved like ghosts. Cassia sat at her late husband's desk, the inkpot still damp from his final edicts. Her hand trailed the grain of the wood, stopping on a bloodstain near the edge. He hadn't died in his bed. Not exactly, not that anyone would ever know. Across the room stood Titus Cinna, commander of her husband's bodyguard, a scarred brute with a voice like gravel and eyes that had seen too much. The city whispers, "Domina," he said. Some say poison, others a woman's hand. Let them whisper, Cassia replied, sipping her wine. The truth is rarely as useful as suggestion. She rose, crossing the room with deliberate grace, trailing fingers across the marble busts of old Varini ancestors. Her husband's face, immortalized in stone, stared back at her with vacant authority. He thought himself a lion, she murmured. But lions forget. Rome doesn't reward strength. It rewards appearances. And what are you then? Titus asked. A shadow, she said, voice like velvet, and shadows stretch further than swords. Flashback, 1 month earlier. The consul had been shouting, "You presume to advise me on Senate matters," Marcus thundered, pacing their private chamber in full regalia. "You're a woman, a pretty one, I'll admit." But Rome was not built by clever wives and bedroom intrigues. No, Cassia replied from the chaise, swirling her goblet. Rome was built by men too proud to listen. He struck her. Not hard. Just enough to remind her what Rome expected. She touched her lip, tasted blood, and smiled. That night, she kissed him softly before sleep. And when he drifted off, she watched him snore beside her, fat and aging, already half in the grave. The next morning, she ordered the kitchen to remove the bitter almonds from the dessert wine. It wouldn't be needed. Present day, the plan begins. Cassia unfurled the first scroll. Land holdings, villa debts, unpaid favors, all of them threads waiting to be pulled. Marcus had left her no love, but he'd left her leverage. More importantly, he'd left her underestimated. She would not wear black forever. She dipped her quill and began to write names. 1 column for allies, 1 for enemies, a third for men who didn't know which they were. As she worked, her steward entered. "Domina, your stepson is here." "Gaius?" she said, without looking up. "How sweet. Does he come to mourn or accuse?" "He brings the tribune Marcellus with him." "And a priest?" Cassia smirked. "Then he comes to do both." Gaius Varinius was everything Marcus had not been, handsome, charismatic, and stupid. He stood rigid in the atrium, flanked by the tribune and a red-robed priest of Mars. "Stepmother," Gaius said coolly, "you've been busy." Cassia offered him a smile as thin as papyrus. "Mourning suits me. We have questions about the consul's final days." She approached slowly, each step deliberate. Do you mourn him, Gaius, or simply covet what he left behind? You insult me. Not yet, she whispered, but stay long enough. She turned to the priest. You will not find the gods here, Father, only ghosts and ambition. Is that a confession? Marcellus asked. Cassia leaned close, her breath grazing his ear. It's a warning. She watched them leave, 3 men of Rome, proud and upright. She wondered which of them she would ruin first. Chapter 2. The game begins. Rome, 2 days after the pyre. The mourning period was still technically in effect, but in Cassia's villa, mourning had already become maneuvering. The slaves moved silently through the mosaic-floored atrium, preparing the triclinium for that night's dinner. Cassia had handpicked the guest list like a weapon, every seat a provocation, every plate a test. She didn't want allies, she wanted leverage. Cassia reclined on her chaise, black veil discarded, revealing her sharp green eyes and sharper expression. A servant dabbed perfume behind her ears, not too much, just enough to carry across the room and linger in memory like a ghost. Bring the good wine, she said, and the scandalous amphorae. Domina? Asked her steward. The ones Marcus banned, she said with a smile. Tonight we pour from memory. That evening, the dinner of serpents. There were 6 guests. None trusted each other. That was the point. Senator Decimus Flaccus, bloated with ego and wine debts, useful for rumors and more pliable in debt than in debate. General Vitellius Crassus, fresh from Gaul, too brutal for politics but deeply loyal to whoever paid his troops. And Crispus, a banker with eyes like a frog and hands always damp. He controlled the loans Marcus left behind, the tribune Marcellus, young, beautiful, ambitious, and already tangled in Cassia's web, in Julia Pulchra, Rome's most discreet courtesan, who knew too many secrets to still be breathing. And finally, Titus Cinna, no longer just her bodyguard, now a quiet observer with a blade and a conscience on call. Cassia didn't sit at the head of the table. She lounged in the center, positioned like a queen in a trap designed to flatter. To my husband, she said, raising her cup. May his name echo in the forum, and nowhere else. Laughter, uneasy, forced. You joke boldly for a widow, sneered Decimus. I grieve in ways Rome finds productive, she replied smoothly. He left debts. I intend to collect on grief. She turned her gaze to Crispus. Tell me, dear banker, what does Marcus owe? 4,000 sestertii, and 2 contracts, land and grain. We'll pay the grain, Cassia said. The land, we'll renegotiate, perhaps with interest and gossip. Gossip has no coin, Crispus muttered. Cassia leaned in, her eyes glittering. You only say that because no one gossips about you. He paled. Side conversation, a whispered proposition. Cassia drew the tribune aside near the fountains between courses. You looked pale during the toast, she said. I dislike speaking ill of the dead, then speak well of the living, she purred. Back my claim to Marcus's remaining seat on the tribunal council. It's ceremonial, but visible. You want in? He blinked. No, dear tribune. I want next to. The men with power rarely see the woman whispering behind them. She placed a hand on his chest, where the armor thinned. Support me, or find yourself across from me. And what if I want both? She smiled. Then stop wanting. Start earning, end of night, the first blood. As guests departed, Julia Pulchra lingered. You're playing a dangerous game, Cassia. Rome is a dangerous board, and what's your endgame? Survival, Cassia said, voice like silk, followed by silence. Of your enemies, of the Senate. Julia raised an eyebrow. And if someone else plays faster? Cassia gestured toward the steps of the villa, where a young maidservant lay dead, discreetly cloaked beneath a tapestry. Then I reset the board. Cassia watched the moonlight curl across her wine cup. She tasted the game, and Rome was delicious. Chapter 3, The Boy and the Blade. The Senate floor smelled of oiled marble, old incense, and rotting pride. Dozens of white togas shifted like vultures around a corpse, forming a crescent around the central dais. At its heart stood Gaius Varinius, heir to a dead man's seat and eager to inherit more than land and titles. He looked crisp, too crisp, as if dignity were something that could be pressed into linen. His voice echoed across the chamber, clear and full of venom. The death of Consul Marcus Varinius was not the will of the gods, he proclaimed. It was orchestrated, preceded by whispers, by shadows. Poison is not always in the cup. It can be in the kiss. A ripple passed through the chamber. Theatrics, well rehearsed. At the periphery, Cassia Octavia stood in half mourning. Her veil was drawn back just enough to show one eye, the color of polished jade, sharp enough to slice through silence. She stepped forward without ceremony. "You speak as if grief has granted you wisdom," she said, voice calm, unhurried. "But it's only made you louder." Gaius didn't blink. "My father's blood deserves justice." Cassia descended the dais steps slowly, like silk unraveling. "And your ambition deserves an audience. Here we are." She stopped inches from him, lifting her veil fully. Her beauty struck the chamber like heat, unyielding, not gentle. "Careful, Gaius," she said softly. "Rome may forgive slander against the dead, but she never forgets those who insult the living." A pause. "You think yourself untouchable?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Just expensive." Laughter stirred in the chamber, not loud, but enough, the kind that shifts power, the kind that stings. That evening, the torches flickered low in the villa's inner courtyard. The moon hung fat and drowsy above the marble fountain as Titus Sina approached Cassia's study, his boot silent against the mosaic floor. She was at her desk, robe loose, hair unbound, scribbling names with the precision of a general. "He made his move," Titus said. "Tried to frame you. It didn't land." Cassia didn't look up. Of course it didn't. He's still performing. Theatrics bore Rome after Act 2. He has sympathizers, priests, Tribune Marcellus. Then they've picked the wrong god to pray to. Titus watched her for a long moment. She circled a name in red ink, then crossed another out. "Would you like me to act?" he asked. "Not yet," she murmured. "Dead boys become martyrs. Let's ruin him first." Later that night, the heir stumbled through the side streets of the Subura, his cloak torn, his temper frayed. Gaius cursed under his breath as he kicked a broken amphora, shards skittering across the cobbles. His meeting with an old family ally had gone sour. Whispers of dishonor, of debts, of illegitimacy. "That bitch thinks she owns Rome," he muttered. "Thinks silk gives her teeth." "Funny thing about silk," said a voice from the dark. Titus stepped out of the shadows, blade sheathed, but his presence was sharper than steel. "It stretches. Then it tightens." Gaius squared his shoulders, but his hands trembled slightly. "You wouldn't dare." "She didn't ask me to," Titus replied. Yet, with a smirk, he turned and vanished into the alleys, leaving only tension and sweat in his wake. By morning, Rome whispered anew. The tribune had distanced himself from Gaius. A high priest withdrew support. An anonymous message claimed Gaius's mother had once been a courtesan in disguise. No proof, just poison. And that was enough. Cassia sat alone at her vanity, bathed in the pale gold of morning. Her robe slipped off one shoulder, exposing the curve of her neck. She traced the rim of her goblet with one finger, eyes fixed on her reflection. Not triumphant, not gloating, just calculating. Behind her, Julia Pulchra emerged silently from the shadows. "You should have had him killed," she said. Cassia didn't turn. "A dead boy is mourned. A ruined one is forgotten." She dipped her finger into the wine and wrote Gaius's name across the glass, each letter smudging beneath her touch, then wiped it clean with a single swipe. He was bleeding now. Not from wounds, from relevance. Chapter 4. Veils and Vows. The Temple of Vesta sat at the edge of the forum like a memory too sacred to erase. Columns coiled upward like white flames, wrapped in ivy and incense smoke. The scent of burning oils lingered in the morning air, lavender, myrrh, ash. Inside, the world was still. Outside, Rome roared. Cassia Octavia moved through the marble corridor as if born to it. Her mourning robes had been replaced by a robe of soft cream linen, pinned high at her shoulder. A thin veil draped from her headdress, not to hide her beauty, but to frame it like a blade in its scabbard. Today, she wasn't playing the grieving widow. Today, she was becoming myth. The high priestess stood beneath a fig tree in the temple garden, her robes bleached with time, her face carved with the wisdom of surviving Rome's shifting winds. Cassia bowed only slightly. "You come seeking alignment," the priestess said, "not piety." "I come seeking refuge," Cassia replied. "The kind only gods and their guardians can offer." "Refuge or immunity?" Cassia tilted her head. "Does it matter if Rome believes it?" The priestess smiled, almost despite herself. "And what if she sees through you?" Cassia's reply was quiet, absolute. "Then I shall veil myself again and walk deeper." That evening, Cassia opened the gates of her villa to a different kind of senate. No men, no titles, just wives, widows, mistresses, daughters of senators, mothers of tribunes, the women of Rome who were told to stay quiet but never did. They gathered in her candlelit courtyard, wine cups in hand, laughter sharp, eyes sharper. No servants were present. Cassia served them herself, a deliberate reversal of custom that unsettled even the boldest guests. "The Senate debates grain tariffs," one woman murmured. "But the portmasters take bribes," said another. "My husband hides coin in the walls," a third confessed, "but prays at the altar like Augustus himself." Cassia let them speak, let them circle each other like wolves sniffing for weakness. Then she handed each of them a sealed scroll. Inside each, the kind of secrets that rewire loyalties, a lover's name, a falsified will, a forged contract, and written across each scroll in her own hand in wax-dyed blood red. "We remember." It was near midnight when Tribune Marcellus arrived. He found her beneath the garden's laurel trees, seated alone beside a basin of still water. Her veil was gone, her hair unbound. The torchlight made her skin glow like marble just before it's carved. "You're aligning with the Vestals now?" he asked, stepping closer. "I'm aligning with survival," she said, not looking at him. "You once told me survival was beneath you. That was before I learned how valuable a well-fed rumor can be." He stepped beside her, eyes searching. "Why summon me?" Cassia turned to him fully. "I didn't summon you, but I hoped you'd come." She rose and brushed past him, letting her fingers trace along his arm, then disappear into the darkened corridor beyond the garden. He followed. They didn't speak again that night. The next morning, Rome woke to whispers. Cassia Octavia had donated 2,000 sestertii to the Temple of Vesta. She had sworn a vow of restraint, no remarriage for 1 year. She had been seen walking barefoot into the temple gardens. Purity, it seemed, had a new priestess. But not everyone was taken in. In the women's baths of the temple annex, Livia Pulchra watched Cassia from across the steam. Younger, hungrier, and now fully aligned with Gaius, she wrapped her towel tighter and crossed the marble floor like a cat preparing to pounce. "You wear modesty like perfume," Livia said, "fleeting, decorative." Cassia didn't look up. "And you wear desperation like silk," she murmured, "tight, loud, transparent." Livia's lips tightened. "Your piety won't protect you forever." Cassia finally looked her in the eye. "No, but it buys me time, which is all I need to end you." 3 days later, Cassia stood once again beneath the temple's sacred flame. But this time she brought offerings, not of fruit or coin, but of information. She burned her scrolls one by one, watching the smoke rise like absolution. To the public, it was a symbolic gesture. Letting go of her husband's debts, her enemies' crimes, her own past. To those who mattered, it was a warning. She had already memorized everything. That night, Tribune Marcellus joined her in the side chamber of the temple. He wore no armor, no insignia, just a white tunic and silence. She poured him wine. He didn't drink. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Which part?" "Sleeping with me, aligning with the Vestals, burning your power." She met his gaze without blinking. "You think I burned my power?" She stepped close and pressed her hand to his chest. "Darling, I ignited it." Cassia wore white now, not for purity, but because blood, like ambition, was more striking against it. Chapter 5. The Poisoned Cup. The Villa Varinia was alive with music and wine. Laughter curled through the halls like incense, light, sweet, and deceiving. It was the feast of Saturnalia, Rome's most indulgent celebration, when slaves dined like masters and propriety took the night off. For most, it was a holiday. For Cassia Octavia, it was an opportunity, a night of masks, of inversion, of alibis wrapped in revelry. She stood at the top of the stairs overlooking the atrium, wearing a stola of deep violet stitched with golden serpents. Her hair was coiled into a crown of braids, pinned with pearls and hidden needles. Her cup was never empty, though she barely drank. Her laughter came easily, too easily. Tonight was not about her mourning. It was about her reemergence. The guest list had been carefully curated. No husbandless wives, no poets, only men who had once ignored her, mocked her, controlled her late husband. Each one arrived believing they were the center of the web. They were wrong. Senator Decimus Flaccus waddled toward her, face flushed with wine and arrogance. He leaned in, lips greasy with honeyed pork and self-importance. "A lovely celebration, Domina," he slurred. "And here I thought you'd fade like all proper widows." Cassia touched his cheek gently, her smile serene. "Oh, Decimus, I do fade, just not from memory." He laughed, missing the ice in her tone. "I hear your debts are vanishing like magic." "Yes," she said, "magic and mathematics." She handed him a goblet of wine, one of the special amphorae, imported, costly, precise. Across the room, Titus Cinna leaned against a pillar, arms crossed. He watched Cassia with the gaze of a man guarding not just a body, but a legacy. He'd killed before, for the consul, for Rome. Now he waited, not for orders, for confirmation. Cassia met his eyes, a nod. As the night deepened, the feast took on a dreamlike quality. Fruit glistened under torchlight. Dancers spun in red and gold silk. Jokes turned body. Voices slurred. And Senator Decimus began to cough. It was subtle at first, just a clearing of the throat, a wheeze. Then came the retching. Then the silence. Too silent. Rome knew the difference between drunken collapse and a man dying from within. He dropped to the marble floor like a sack of olives, eyes bulging, hands clutching at the air. Then stillness, a scream, a rush of bodies, chaos like perfume and heat. Cassia stood motionless as the crowd gathered. She did not cry out. She did not run. She simply looked down at him and said, "That wine was a gift from Gaul. Such a shame." Later, in the inner chambers of the villa, Julia Pulchra confronted her. "You poisoned a senator," she hissed. Cassia unpinned her hair slowly, letting it fall around her shoulders. "No." He choked. "Everyone saw, then let everyone explain it to the Senate," Cassia replied. "They'll spend months debating what they think they saw. By then, no one will care." Julia crossed her arms. "You've made an enemy of Livia. She's aligning with Gaius again. Rumor is they plan to challenge your claim to Marcus's land and titles." Cassia poured herself a final goblet of wine and sat near the fire. "Then let them challenge. They'll find I've already changed the locks." In a dark chamber beneath the villa, Titus cleaned the blade he hadn't used. Tonight's killing hadn't needed one. Not every death was born from violence. Some, he thought, were born from calculation. In a city of daggers, Cassia had offered a cup, and Rome had sipped it gladly. Chapter 6. Whispers in the Bathhouse. The baths of Agrippina weren't a place for politics, at least not officially, but Rome knew better. Here, where steam curled around flesh and fragrance masked tension, deals were sealed in sweat and whispers. It was where wives softened their enemies, where courtesans measured rivals, and where power wore perfume instead of armor. Cassia Octavia entered like she owned the place. She wore only a sheer linen wrap and her hair pinned in bronze. Steam clung to her skin, turning her into something half divine. Other women fell silent when she passed, parting like reeds before a storm. Some bowed, some glared. Cassia bathed alone, for now. She eased into the tepidarium, surrounded by marble walls inlaid with mosaics of goddesses and lovers. Her reflection fractured across the surface of the water, but she didn't stare at herself. She watched the room. A senator's wife whispered to a servant. A vestal in training cast glances too curious for her station. A former courtesan, her hair now gray, but her eyes still calculating, offered a nod of respect. This was no place for coins. Only currency of a different kind. Moments later, Livia Pulchra entered, younger, bolder, draped in a wet silk wrap that clung to her curves like scandal. Her gaze met Cassia's and held. "I wondered if you still bathed in public," Livia said, sliding into the pool opposite her. "Only when I intend to clean something," Cassia replied. "Tonight, it's rumor." The other women pretended not to listen. "They say you killed Decimus," Livia whispered. "They say many things, but I noticed none of them left the feast early." "Rome forgets the brave," Livia said, "but she rewards the visible." "Then you must be rich," Cassia murmured. They moved closer. The water hissed as a servant poured in a fresh infusion of lavender and eucalyptus. Steam thickened. Voices dimmed. "Gaius will make a formal claim against your estate," Livia said, voice low. "Let him. My scrolls are already in the hands of his creditors. He'll challenge your connection to the Vestals." Cassia tilted her head, smiling faintly. "I only ever claim to walk with the gods, not obey them." Livia's mouth tightened. Her poise cracked for a single heartbeat. "You can't keep Rome under your thumb forever." Cassia leaned forward, their faces inches apart. The air between them crackled hotter than the steam. "I don't keep Rome under my thumb, Livia. I let her kiss my ring." Later, as the sun dipped beyond the rooftops, Cassia stepped from the bathhouse wrapped in nothing but linen, her skin warm and glistening. Titus Cinna was waiting by the carriage, arms crossed, sword at his hip. "Trouble?" he asked. "Not yet," she said, "but it's bubbling nicely." He opened the door for her. She paused, glancing back at the rising columns of steam behind her. "She thinks I'm drowning," she murmured. "And are you?" Cassia smiled. "No, Titus. I'm steeping—" In the bathhouse, they traded secrets like soap, and Cassia always left cleaner than she came. Chapter 7. The Fire of the Forum. The Senate met at dawn, not for ritual, not for reverence, for fear. Word had spread like fever through the marble halls. Gaius Varinius was moving against Cassia. Official charges, a full investigation, ties to poisoning, allegations of fraud, seduction, even heresy. It would have worked on someone else. But Cassia didn't flinch. She arrived late and alone, dressed in a flowing stola of pearl gray, her veil sheer, her eyes exposed. No jewelry, no servants, no theatrics. Just a woman walking into the lion's den as if she were checking her reflection. Every senator watched her descend the Curia steps like a falling star. Some sneered, some shifted nervously. Gaius stood at the center, scroll in hand, ring glinting with his father's seal. His voice rang out clear. "I bring formal charges against Cassia Octavia, widow of Consul Marcus Varinius, accused of sedition, murder by poison, bribery of temple officials, and corruption of sacred rites." The room held its breath. Cassia stepped forward and smiled. She didn't speak to the senators. She spoke to the crowd gathered outside, hundreds of plebeians, merchants, laborers, wives, courtesans, temple girls, all summoned not by decree, but by whispers. They watched from beyond the forum gates as Cassia raised her voice like a priestess at the altar. "Rome has always feared what it cannot control," she said. "Men who steal, men who lie, and women who do not grieve the way they're told. Yes, I drink wine. Yes, I speak plainly. And yes, I buried a man who beat me more often than he praised me. You want to call that sedition? Call it survival." The crowd stirred. Gaius turned red. "You mock the Senate," he snapped. Cassia turned to him. "No, Gaius, I am the Senate, or at least the only part that still remembers how to listen." Then she reached into her satchel and pulled free a collection of sealed letters. "From your estates," she said. "From your bankers, from your lovers, from your priests. Every secret you've buried, I've dug up." She tossed them onto the marble floor. "Burn me if you want," she whispered. "But you'll burn with me." Chaos followed. Senators shouted. Tribunes cursed. One priest fainted. And then the unthinkable happened. The crowd outside cheered, not for justice, for her. They roared her name. Women held up their scarves. A group of children shouted Cassia Imperia over and over until it echoed against the temple of Saturn. Gaius tried to speak again, but no one heard him. The forum no longer belonged to the Senate. It belonged to her. Later that evening, Cassia returned to her villa. She removed her sandals slowly, one by one, as if shedding armor. Titus was waiting in the atrium. "You've made yourself a target," he said. "No," she replied, pouring herself a goblet of wine. "I've made myself a banner. There will be backlash." "Of course," she said, raising the cup. "That's how you know the fire is spreading." In the shadows of the city, bonfires were lit. Not riots, not rebellion, celebration. Cassia had survived the forum, and now the Senate was the one under investigation. She didn't burn Rome, she just reminded it how dry the kindling had become. Chapter 8. The Lovers Pact. The villa on the coast smelled of salt, myrrh, and sweat. Far from Rome's smoke-choked politics and sharpened whispers, Cassia Octavia sat in the shade of a laurel tree overlooking the sea. The wind tugged gently at the hem of her gown, and for once she did not stop it. She was barefoot, hair loose, goblet full. Beside her, the sound of sharpening steel rasped like breath through teeth. Titus Cinna sat cross-legged, tending to a curved dagger with the same care a priest might give a sacrificial blade. His shirt was discarded. Scars lined his back like forgotten maps. "You should have stayed in Rome," he said, without looking up. "I needed air," she replied, "and a view that doesn't reek of marble and ambition. You brought both with you." Cassia smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. They ate in silence that evening. Roasted sea bass, olives, bread torn by hand, no servants, no pretense, only truth. When night fell, the stars arrived heavy and slow, blanketing the coast like fate made visible. Cassia poured them both wine, her fingers brushing his when she handed him the cup. "I know what you did," she said. Titus didn't blink. "Which part?" "The part where my husband died." The words hung there, suspended between confession and confirmation. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. "Did he suffer?" she asked after a long pause. Titus met her gaze, steady, unapologetic. "No, but he deserved to." Cassia stood and walked to the edge of the terrace, sea wind knotting her hair. "You didn't do it for me. No, you didn't even do it for Rome. No." She turned. "Then why?" He rose slowly, crossed to her, and placed the dagger on the table beside the goblet. "Because I was tired of watching good men die while monsters made laws. And now? Now I serve a woman who makes monsters afraid." They didn't speak again. Not with words. Their mouths met like clashing empires, hungry, bruising, breathless. Her fingers tugged his hair. His hands slid beneath her robe. The sea raged in the distance, unseen. There was no tenderness, only recognition, a contract signed in skin. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and silence, Cassia stared at the rafters. "I'm going to break the Senate," she said softly. "Not burn it, break it, until it limps behind me." Titus traced the scar below her ribs. "Then we'll need allies. We'll need something better," she said. "We'll need ghosts." At dawn, they stood side by side on the terrace, looking east. Cassia held a scroll in one hand, sealed in black wax. "This goes to Alexandria," she said, "to a man who owes me his title. And the others?" She turned to him. "They go to those who thought I wouldn't remember. The pact was not sealed with ink, nor wine, nor oaths. It was sealed with shared silence, both knowing what they'd destroy together, and neither daring to stop." Chapter 9. The Widow Rises. The forum smelled different now. It wasn't the incense. It wasn't the sweat of senators or the iron tang of soldiers. It was something intangible, like fear dressed in perfume, heavy and inescapable. Cassia Octavia walked through it like a woman returning to her own garden. The crowd parted. No guards cleared her path. They didn't need to. Rome knew who she was now, not the consul's widow. The city's new center of gravity. Rumors swirled like crows. The Senatus Populusque Romanus, the mighty Senate and people of Rome, had bent. Not officially, not in edict, but in posture. Men who once refused to meet her eye now bowed slightly as she passed. They called it diplomacy. She called it confirmation. On the steps of the Curia, a delegation awaited her. Tribune Marcellus, younger and slicker than ever, spoke first. "The city is strained. The crowds chant your name." "Then let them," she replied. "They've chanted worse. The Senate wants your help calming the streets." Cassia raised an eyebrow. "Of course they do. We'd need a public statement. Something unifying." She smiled faintly, almost motherly. Unity is built with promises, Tribune, but it's held with leverage. You're not asking for a seat? No, she said, that would make it official and vulnerable. Then what do you want? Cassia stepped closer, her voice just above a whisper. I want influence, without the paperwork. That afternoon, Cassia addressed the forum, not from the curious steps, but from the Temple of Concord, the symbolic bridge between Senate and people. It was empty now. She stood alone before a crowd of thousands. I do not speak as a senator. I speak as a Roman, not as a wife, not as a widow, but as a citizen who has buried too many good men and too many bad laws. The streets are yours. The power is yours. But if you want me to guide it, then understand, I will not kneel to the old ways. I will not apologize for surviving, and I will not pretend my silence is consent. The crowd erupted. Cassia Imperia, they shouted, again and again. Cassia Imperia. That night she dined with her inner circle, Julia Pulchra, Titus, a few chosen wives from Rome's elite families, and 2 temple scribes who owed her favors deeper than coin. They didn't toast her, they didn't dare, but they listened, and that was enough. Livia Pulchra, elsewhere in the city, met with Gaius Varinius and a group of former allies. Their voices were low, their plans darker. They had not expected Cassia to rise so far, so fast. Livia watched the torches burn beyond her balcony and whispered to Gaius, "She's not ruling Rome. She's seducing it." Gaius poured wine with a shaking hand. "Then we make her a widow again." Cassia did not sit on a throne. She didn't need to. Rome was already standing in her shadow. Chapter 10. The Throne Without a Crown. The Palatine Villa stood quiet under a silver moon. No guards patrolled its marble halls. No senators dared call at its doors. Inside, Cassia Octavia sat alone in her study, dressed not for war, nor mourning, nor seduction. Just a soft wool tunic, unbound hair, bare feet against cool stone. She looked ordinary. And yet, the scrolls on her desk bore the seals of generals. The coin in her vault was minted from 5 provinces. And the letters pouring in daily from Alexandria, Carthage, and Ephesus all began the same. To the Lady Octavia, matron of Rome. She never asked for that title, but no one was asking any more. Rome had shifted. It hadn't screamed when it moved. It sighed. The Senate still sat. The temple still prayed. But it was Cassia who whispered into the ears of power, and judges now referenced her rulings. When Tribune Marcellus deferred to her before votes, and 3 magistrates owed their careers to her sponsorship. And Gaius Varinius? He had vanished into exile, his estate sold, his supporters quietly absorbed. His downfall had been slow, surgical. Cassia had not sent assassins. She had sent rumors, debts, documents, paper, not poison. That morning she received a visitor. Livia Pulchra, dressed in mourning blue, arrived unannounced. No guards blocked her path. They knew better. The 2 women sat beneath the olive tree in the courtyard, where the fountain murmured like distant applause. Livia looked tired, older, her eyes still sharp but ringed in sleepless shadow. "So it ends," she said. "No," Cassia replied. "It settles. You've taken everything." Cassia looked down at her cup, then at the garden. "I've taken nothing," she said. "Men gave me power when they underestimated me. Women gave me loyalty when they had no one else. Rome gave me silence, and I filled it." Livia's jaw clenched. "And what happens now?" "Now?" Cassia tilted her head. "Now I stay off the records. I attend no Senate meetings. I make no speeches. I simply suggest. So you'll rule without ruling." Cassia smiled faintly. "As Rome prefers." That night Titus returned. He was dirt-streaked and road-worn, having ridden back from Etruria, where he'd quelled a merchant revolt with nothing more than a signature bearing Cassia's mark. He entered quietly, but she sensed him anyway. "You're late," she said. "You're unsurprised." He knelt beside her chair. She placed her hand on his head. "You were always more useful in shadows," she said, "and you were always more dangerous in daylight." Later, as they lay together, he asked the question neither had dared speak aloud. "Is this it?" She stared at the ceiling, as if reading an invisible scroll. "It's never it," she said. "There's always another rumor, another revolt, another girl watching me and wondering if she has to marry her way into power, or take it. And if she chooses the second—" Cassia turned, kissed his shoulder, and whispered, "Then she'll have my blessing." The end. Epilogue. 10 years later, a young senator entered the Curiate chamber to deliver a petition. He paused beneath the statue of Concordia, newly restored, the goddess now sculpted in Cassia's likeness. Not officially, of course, but everyone knew. They always knew. Outside, beneath a shady arch, a young girl sat with a scroll open in her lap. She turned to her mother and asked, "Was she ever empress?" Her mother smiled, smoothed the girl's hair, and said, "No, darling. She was never crowned. Then what was she?" The mother looked toward the distant Villa Octavia, still standing, still watched, still silent. She was the woman the crowned ones feared. In the end, she ruled nothing, and no one, and somehow that made her the most powerful Roman of all. Author's note: thank you for walking these marble corridors with me, where silk conceals blades and whispers move empires. The Consul's Widow is more than a story of power. It's a reckoning, a reminder that Rome didn't just burn with swords and ambition. It simmered with veils, vows, and women no one thought to fear until it was too late. Cassia Octavia was never meant to rule. That was her greatest advantage. To those who've ever been underestimated, may you rise, may you strike, and may you never need a crown to claim what's yours. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you just a little more dangerous, please like, comment, and subscribe to support more tales like this one. History remembers the emperors, but Rome remembers her. Brian M. Brumbaugh.